With the introduction of Varlamore Part 3, we got access to Vale Totems, a fletching activity in old school RuneScape that completely changes fletching forever. This is a pretty accessible activity for most accounts, so we're going to cover everything you need to know about this minigame, ranging from requirements to strategies and routes, as well as some fairly AFK technology that you can do alongside training, woodcutting, and forestry, and of course, cover some of the higher efficiency methods that can net you over 400k per hour fairly easily. In terms of requirements for this minigame, level-wise, there really isn't much. You need like level 20 fletching to craft the first totem, and you just need access to this area. In terms of items, I do recommend either having a log basket from Forestry or the pendant of a Tez, which will allow you to teleport mid-run to get more logs. Either of these items are going to help you do a full cycle of the run without running out of logs. Now, if you're very, very low leveled, you might not have access to either of these right now, and I think that's fine because you're likely going to be doing the AFK version of this game you'll see later in the video until your levels get higher. To get here, you're going to use the fairy ring AIS. Then you're going to head northwest, and there's going to be the minigame tutor there. You're going to run through the basic loop there, and you're good to get started. This minigame has a fairly basic loop. All you need to do is use one log to build a totem, and then you're going to carve it into the 3 nearby animals. After that, you're going to decorate it with 4 fletched items. Once you've done that, you move on to the next totem, and you're going to go round in a circle. That's the basic loop of this minigame, but of course, we need to break down the details further, talk about some advanced information, and some tips and tricks as well. When you're crafting the totems and you're picking the animals, the easiest way I found to memorize what order the animals are in is simply by the size of the animal in real life. So number 1 is the buffalo, it's largest there. Number 5 is the scorpion, it's the smallest. And you can just learn the order very quickly that way until a plugin comes out that just tells you what buttons to click. There are a total of 8 totems in this area, and you're going to leverage all of them in the forest for the active version of this minigame. What you're going to do, I recommend starting out at the bank, filling up your inventory with a full set of logs as well as the log basket with the logs inside. If you don't have the log basket, use the pendant of a Tez. And you're going to head over the east with that and your knife, and you're going to craft that first totem. And then from here, all you're going to do is go clockwise through all 8 totems. It's mostly clockwise, but there are a couple of interesting parts in the route. When you get to this totem over here, you will run out of logs if you don't have a log basket. This is where you're going to use the pendant of a Tez because the statue is conveniently right beside you towards the next totem anyways. So get your quickest bank, fill up the inventory, and then head back. Just a reminder though, make sure you activate that statue because you won't be able to use it until you activate it by touching it. Then you're going to work your way back north, go to the tutor, and then this one is not quite as much a circle. You're going to go a little bit south to the one over here by the willows. That will complete your route. You're going to head back to the bank and restock. Each totem does need 4 fletched items, and I recommend that you're fletching in between running the totems. Now you're generally going to be able to fletch more than what you need, which is good. Just make sure you're keeping enough logs to actually build the totems as you're going, but you'll start to see the exact rhythm of how many you can fletch. I just recommend making the longbows for whatever log you're doing. That's typically going to be the best one. If you can't make it, obviously you're going to make the short bows. I just find that the shields, they don't really seem to be worth it because they require 2 logs instead of 1, and then when you use them as decorations, you're not getting any more XP. While you're running in between totems, there's a couple of things in between that you can engage with. The first thing is if an ent goes to an area with like a beautiful rock, beautiful log, and you look at the same thing, you're going to get a little bit of energy back. This is most relevant for people really low level. If you're higher level, something like Graceful is going to keep you topped off anyways. There is also these little end blossom flowers that they seem to leave behind. When you step over 2 of them directly, you get a little buff that states that you're going to get increased offerings for your next totem. Now, I haven't really seen the numbers on this since I seem to cap out on 15 offerings with Redwoods regardless, but I tend to go for these if they're in my path. If they're a little bit out of the way, I generally see it's not super worth it. But for Redwoods, where there might be a little bit of downtime, you could probably go a little bit out of your way to grab them. Every time an ent goes past your totem, it's going to give you an offering, and it's actually going to reduce the totem's durability, which you can see by the leaves associated with the symbol here. Once it gets down to 0 leaves, the totem is destroyed. Depending on the log you're using, you're going to have more health on the totem, so redwood is maxed out, whereas like an oak log, for example, only has 2 leaves, which means 2 offerings happen before it collapses. Now the offerings themselves, you can collect them right away, or you can opt to just let them stack up over time and collect them at the end. That will technically save you a few ticks per rotation if you want to do that. And as far as I can tell, I couldn't reach a limit in my session. I got one to over like 2,500 offerings, and it was still piling up, which was very satisfying to collect. So let's talk about XP rates for this minigame, and we'll go over some of the top logs. So for U logs, you can expect about 200k per hour. For magics, you can expect about 300 to 330k per hour, which is really good. Redwood logs, while making the walking staff, I was getting very similar XP to magic logs. So if you're a main, you might want to go whichever one is cheaper, or if you don't have the levels to make redwood walking staffs, then hey, you know what, magic's not that far behind. However, there is one method you can do with redwood logs that will put it above magic logs by a pretty significant amount. There are 2 main reasons why redwoods and magics are very close in XP at the base level. The first one has to do with your totem strength. As you make better totems, the ents can give more and more offerings to them before they collapse, as indicated by their leaf icon. However, with redwoods, they end up being so good that you'll finish a route, or you'll get to some point in your route where you're just standing at a totem waiting for an ent to come clear it out, and you're definitely going to lose out on XP during that downtime. Now, you could argue that, hey, it's AFK time, so it's a little bit more chill than Magic's, but even Magic has a little bit of downtime as well. However, that's something we cannot control for. The second factor we definitely can influence, and it has to do with the redwood walking staff. I mentioned before that you shouldn't make the shields because they require 2 logs to make. You don't get more XP either. They take 2 times longer to fletch, so that ends up breaking even. So you're really just spending more logs, which isn't worth it. However, for redwoods, we don't have a redwood longbow. We only have this walking staff, and this walking staff gives miserable fletching XP, like 10 fletching XP when you do it, compared to if it was a redwood longbow, for example, would be about 110 XP. So this begs the question, what if we were to make redwood shields instead? When you do that, you actually end up with fairly good XP rates for redwoods. About 410k I was getting, and I suspect you can get even higher if you were more perfect than me. There are some considerations though to factor in here, and honestly they're not that bad once you get used to them. The big thing here is I mentioned before that you want the log basket or the pendant of a Tez. In this case, you need both. The reason is when you're crafting these shields, you will run out of logs. So having that point in front of the statue to restock is really important, and having the log basket to sustain your logs is really important. So this means that you're going to be banking twice during your route. And even if you're doing this, there's still a little bit of downtime that you're going to have at totems to craft the shields. So redwood totems, again, are taking a long time to break down. The other consideration is the fact that these redwood shields do take longer to fletch, so you'll want to keep that in mind and make sure that you're timing your fletches and your long runs so that you're making the most amount of shields. When you're first starting with the redwood shields, you might feel like you're lagging behind a little bit, but there's going to be points in your run where you're going to start having extras and things are going to feel a lot smoother. There is also an AFK version of this minigame, and it's less so about fletching and running around, and more so around woodcutting and leveling up your woodcutting, or maybe you're working on forestry and you also want to gain some fletching experience and some rewards. Well, what you can do is just park yourself in front of a tree. You got magics here, maples, willows, and just chop that tree like you normally would, but then engage with the totem in front of you for some extra XP and extra rewards, and that's going to add up. You'll probably passively greenlog this activity from doing that. You'll probably gain pretty much equal fletching levels, where before, you fletch a bow for 90 XP, it's not as much as chopping the tree, but now you can sacrifice some of them to the totem, and that's going to bump that up quite a bit. I see no reason why this won't be a top location for forestry. There's even a freaky forester nearby, so I definitely expect people to start migrating here and AFK woodcutting while engaging with one of the totems. I also think this is particularly strong for people leveling up their woodcutting and fletching, like really big noob levels, because you can go to the oak tree, use the totem, you can go to the willow tree, use the totem, and just move your way up the trees, and you're getting a really good amount of XP and good rewards as well. The rewards at this minigame, highly recommend you go for the two main ones because they're super quick to get. You have this spool that can hold a ton of bowstring, but you will need to upgrade it to get more and more bowstring in it if you're interested in that. It's just going to make stringing bows a lot better. You can do 27 at once instead of doing 14. There is also an interesting method you can do where when you use those flax packs that you get from the rewards here, which is a pack that you open and get 25 flax from, you could bring a chunk of those, like 200 plus of those, to a spinning wheel and then just open up 25, make the bows, put them in the spool, and just continuously repeat that and basically never bank ever. So that's going to be an interesting method I want to see people try. The fletching knife is definitely good because it just makes fletching, you know, better, faster. In the minigame itself, it's not going to make a huge difference to XP rates because there is some totem time where you're kind of just standing there anyways, but it will make it so you can get ahead of your fletches a little bit quicker, especially when you're doing redwood shields. I do think that these two rewards, you know, if we didn't have this activity, would be amazing for fletching, but because this activity is already so good, I probably am never ever going to be stringing bows anyways, unless I really want to spend some time bank standing. Outside of the two uniques and the cosmetic, you have a few more common rewards as well. The ant branches, which can help make the atlatl darts, but you do need to combine them with the tips from the new Slayer creatures. On top of that, you have these dirty arrow tips that you can clean, and it gives you a few of each arrow tip, and I was able to get dragon arrow tips. It might be based on level though, so we'll have to see what the thresholds are there, but dragon arrow tips are welcome any day. And then the other big thing that I was seeing was a fair amount of bird's nests, which obviously as an Iron Man having to make my Cerebrus is a welcome thing to see. Everything else is pretty much standard. There's some roots I'll probably never use, there's some blessed bone shards, some animal bark is nice, but those are the main ones. Now, when I'm talking about different mini games or activities, I like to talk about like time to completion or green logging, but it's a little bit different with this activity for a couple of reasons. It has some fundamental differences to similar mini games. So Mastering Mixology, for example, you're in Mastering Mixology primarily for the rewards, less so for the XP. So you stay there as long as you need to stay there to get, you know, the green log or to get a certain item. Right? Now for this mini game, you definitely want a couple of the items, especially if you're already maxed. But what keeps you in this activity, or what's going to be the main driver of this activity, is actually the XP you're getting, not necessarily the rewards. So you'll likely spend more time based on that rather than green logging. But let's say you're maxed. How long does it take to get those 4 slots? I would say probably between 5 and 10 hours. So it's a fairly short grind. I think Jagex did a great job with this fletching activity. It feels like the right level of engagement, like maybe just below Guardians of the Rift in terms of like attention required, which feels really good for the activity. But there's also a bunch of other reasons why I think it's really good. It's accessible for pretty much all types of account, which is definitely a welcome thing to see. It's also got an amazing atmosphere, from the way it looks to the way it sounds, all the little sounds, and the song is just so good. But the thing I really like is that, you know, despite people calling this a mini game, it feels a lot less like a mini game and more like an activity than a lot of other things. It takes place in a forest, a wide forest, where people are doing other things, right? It's not like a closed arena where we're all doing the exact same thing, which is a huge mini game constraint. On top of that, it's not like rounds. It's not like when the round ends, you get your reward or anything like that. This is just a cyclical, always happening thing, which we don't see in typical mini games. So I'm going to stress to call this an activity, and I hope that we do more activities in the future like this.